All right, get your Bibles out. We're looking at Joshua, and I want to give you a little background on Joshua. So go to the book of Exodus, chapter 17. Exodus chapter 17 and verse number 9. Genesis, Exodus chapter 17 and verse 9. And this is the first mention of Joshua in the Bible. Now, there's something called the rule of first mention. Everybody ever heard of that? Whenever you see a first mention in the Bible, you'll find that it usually stands as an outline for that which is to come. So Joshua here is in the Exodus. He was born in Egypt, and with the sole exception of Caleb, he is the only adult Israelite left that will go into Canaan land. All right? Besides Caleb, he and Caleb are the only two adults left that left Egypt and got into the promised land. So remember, what did they do out in that wilderness for 40 years? Complained, murmured, and died. All except two. Even Moses and Aaron died before they crossed into the promised land. So Exodus 17:9 now gives us the first mention of Joshua. Now notice it says, "And Moses said unto Joshua, Choose us out men, and go out and fight with" who? Amalek. That's the king. And it says, "Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the rod of God in mine hand." Now, this is the first mention. Now, you can notice here, there are important clues to Joshua found here. Notice that this is the first mention of him, and now he's called upon to lead an army out to battle. So what does that tell you about Moses' confidence in Joshua? All right? He had confidence in him. Moses had already paid attention to him, and he has confidence to send him forth to be the captain over others. Now you think about that. That's no small task to appoint somebody to go out and fight the battle. It's a big choice, because if you make the wrong choice, what happens? You lose, right? So you want to choose somebody that has valor, that has honor, and that has a commitment to the cause. And Joshua was chosen by Moses to go out and do that. Now look at verse number 13. "And Joshua discomfited Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword." Now Joshua got the orders, and did he say, not today? Did he say maybe next week? Or let me go think about it a while. Let me make a decision here. I want to make a well-informed decision. Let me go think about it, Moses, and I'll get back with you. No. He did exactly what he was ordered to do. He obeyed his superior, and he complied with those orders. And what did he do? He succeeded in his assignment. He succeeded in his assignment. So here we see an illustration of the law of first mention. The initial occurrence of anything in the Scripture supplies the key to later ones, forecasting by means of a broad outline and its subsequent uses. So when you see Joshua here, you see him as a obedient servant, as a leader of men, and as a successful captain of the army, a victor or a hero of the army. So thus it is, the very first time Joshua is brought to our notice, it is as a successful warrior. And note carefully, he's not slaying innocent people, but in fighting the enemies of the Lord. Who told him to go fight the enemy? The Lord. The Lord told them to go fight for this, against this enemy. So here we see in Exodus 17, the foreshadows the work which Joshua would have before him. The immediate verses, verse 14, is a plain hint of his future work as an appointed instrument to execute divine vengeance upon God's foes. Now, the next mention of Joshua is found over in chapter 24. Go there. Exodus 24. Exodus 24, and go down to verse number 13. 24 and 13. And Moses rose up, now look at this, and his minister who? And Moses went up into the mount of God. All right? So Joshua is called up to be Moses' minister. Now what's a minister? It's not a preacher, but it's his servant. Okay? One who renders aid, one who helps, one who assists Moses. All right? Now Moses is going up onto the mount to receive the tablets of the law from God. And the instruction in the law, all the details. Why do you think it took Moses 40 days and nights to be up on the mountain? Because he had a lot to cover. He had a lot to learn, a lot to receive from God. So here now, Joshua is his minister, and Moses and him go up into the mountain, but yet Joshua doesn't go all the way up. He stays in a place slightly lower, and Moses goes on up and receives and talks to God. Now think about this. This is a trial for Joshua. How long did Moses stay up there? So who's standing there on the mountain by himself, all alone, waiting for Moses? Joshua. So you see, Joshua was going to be Moses' minister, but he was going to also be a leader of Israel as well. So he was tried with his faithfulness here on the mountain. Now he could have left and said, well, Moses ain't coming back, I'm going home. He could have done that. And then it would have been over. He wouldn't have been the leader. But God had chosen him already as a leader to replace Moses. So Joshua stayed there. All right. And he was left alone for 40 days and 40 nights. Look down at chapter 24, verse 8. It says, and Moses took the blood, chapter 24, verse 8. Is that right? Yeah. And Moses took the blood and sprinkled it on the people and said, behold, the blood of the covenant which the Lord hath made with you concerning all these words. So, no, that's not the right verse. But Joshua here now comes down. Joshua stays there until Moses comes down. And then Joshua hears a noise in the camp. Remember that? Okay. He hears a noise in the camp. And what is that noise? Anybody remember? Right. Joshua gave them the benefit of the doubt and said, well, it sounds like war in the camp. It sounds like men fighting and hollering and carrying on because of conflict, like they were being conquered or they've been attacked or something. So Joshua was giving them the benefit of the doubt. But what did Moses say? What did Moses say? That that's not the sound of war. That's the sound of sound of merriment. You think about that. Here now Moses is up receiving the law. Here Joshua is being tested. Here Joshua's up on the mountain and Moses is starting to head down, and all of a sudden Joshua hears the racket in the camp. And Moses says, nah, that's not war, that's celebration. That's partying. So now think about this. Joshua's test of character was that he remained faithful up on that mountain. He stayed there. He waited on Moses patiently, and he showed his faithfulness to Moses and this ministry. All right? But now think in contrast about Aaron. What did Aaron do while they were waiting on Moses to come back? Right. The people pressured him, and he made a golden calf out of the gold of their earrings. Remember that? And they said, this is going to be who brought us out of Egypt. And this is going to be who takes us back. So here's Aaron now, and his trial of faith, he failed. He gave in to the people. He went and did what they said, and he probably would have went back with them. So his faithfulness was tried, and he failed the test in contrast to Joshua. But Joshua trustfully and persevered, awaiting his master's return. So he was tried and proved, and also manifested to be a vessel of honor, sanctified, and meet for the master's use. Looks at Exodus 32. Exodus 32. And go down to verse 15. Excuse me. Be good to get rid of this cough. Ain't it, Aaron? 32:15. And Moses turned and went down from the mount, and the 2 tables of the testimony were in his hand. Tables were written on both their sides, on the one side and on the other. And the tables were the work of God, and the writing was the writing of God. When Joshua heard the noise of the people as they shouted, he said unto Moses, There is a noise of war in the camp. He said, It is not the voice of them that shout for mastery, neither is it the voice of them that cry for being overcome, and it is but the noise of them that sing do I hear. So here comes Moses down the mountain, and Moses knows what's going on, doesn't he? Moses knows that it's not a war, but rather it is a party going on while he's been gone. So you see how easily they went aside just in a month and a half, not even a month and a half, 40 days, and they decide they're going back to Egypt, and they decide they're going to take this golden calf and call that their God. Now think about that, how stubborn these people are, how stiff-necked they are, how proud they are to say, we want to go back to Egypt. And what had been going on with them in Egypt, as we made the point this morning? Right. They were in slavery. They were oppressed and severely oppressed. As a matter of fact, remember Pharaoh was trying to commit genocide upon them by having all the male-born children killed at birth. Remember that? Moses escaped that. His mother hid him. And remember, she put him in that little ark, that little basket of bulrush, and she pitched it with tar, and then she set him in that river, and he floated across right to where, by chance, the Pharaoh's daughter would be bathing. Well, it wasn't by chance, was it? It was by the direct providence of God. And Moses, of course, started crying, and that brought the heart out of the Pharaoh's daughter. And she saw the baby cry and said, oh, I'm going to raise this baby. And she did. And then it's fascinating how God paid Moses' mother to nurse Moses during that time. So she not only provided Israel with a hero that would come, but she also got paid to do it. What do you think about that? She got paid to raise Moses, nurse him until he was weaned. So that was a double blessing on his mama, and taking care of Moses was something that she couldn't do unless she was authorized by the Pharaoh's daughter to do it. So God worked that out in her favor for her faithfulness. Now you imagine here, taking your baby, putting it in a basket, and sending it down the river. Now remember, this is the Nile River. What's in the Nile River? Crocodiles, critters that eat things, right? I think they've got hippos. I think they've got crocodiles. They got snakes. They got all that kind of stuff that hang around that river. But the providing hand of God was there, and he guided that little basket right across the river to where Pharaoh's daughter was going to be bathing. And of course, they rescued Moses. So you see here how God can take care of his people. Joshua trusted in God, and he persevered. He was ordered to go and conquer the Amalekites, and did conquer the Amalekites. He was ordered to go up with Moses onto the mountain, and there he stayed by himself, not with friends, not with anybody else. Even Moses left him and went on up higher to receive the instruction. Now Joshua was sitting there on the side of the mountain waiting on Moses, and he does so faithfully. So that gives us a clue as to who Joshua is. He's a faithful man. When he's called upon to do, he does. He's faithful, he's trustworthy, he's dependable, and you can see here that Joshua stayed right with Moses all the way through. And we'll see Joshua mentioned again next time. We'll see him mentioned about being one of the 12 spies sent over into the promised land to spy out the land. That's why Joshua and Caleb were the only two left that remained alive from that generation, because they brought back a good report and said, hey, let's go in. God's given us a land flowing milk and honey. Look here at these grapes that we carried in. And yeah, there may be giants there, but we're going to be victorious. So they gave a good report. And what happened though? The other 10, what'd they do? Right? The other 10 said, hey, there's giants in that land. Ain't no way. We're like grasshoppers in their sight. Ain't no way we could win. Now they forgot who they were traveling with. They forgot God. They forgot the promise that they were going to occupy that land. They knew that they could. They knew that they could, but then they got afraid and said, "Oh, we're not going. We're gonna go somewhere else." And then Joshua or Moses rebuked them, and then they said, "Oh, okay, we'll go in." Moses says, God's done told you no. You're not going in." So they tried to go to that battle of Ai, and what happened to them? They got defeated. Why? Because they didn't listen to God. They didn't listen to Moses, and they ended up having to go back out into the wilderness anyway. And all those 10 spies and everybody else left in that generation died out there in the wilderness. Moses died, Aaron died, and all the rest of those gang, except for Joshua and Caleb, they remained alive to go in and take possession of the land. Remember Caleb? What did Caleb want for a possession? When he went in and spied out the land, what did he see that he wanted? Anybody remember? A mountain. He said, I want that mountain. There's one particular place that he knew that he would have to fight to get it, but he wanted it. And he told God he wanted it, and guess what? God gave it to him. So Caleb said, I want that mountain. And he was an old man, remember? He was an old man then. So it would be more difficult for him to do that, but he was fighting in faith, just as the rest, Joshua was fighting in faith, and God provided for him and gave him, in that distribution of the land, gave that mountain to Caleb because of his faithfulness. Joshua is the same way. God saw him through the wilderness. He helped protect him from the enemies. And now here in the book of Joshua, we're going to see where he's commissioned after Moses dies to take the people into the promised land. So as you read ahead, look at Joshua chapter 1. And again, look at the challenge of God's calling Joshua and remind yourself, hey, if I had been in that wilderness with those rascals for 40 years and all they did was backbite and complain, and they did the same thing to Moses and Aaron, and they always were trying to murmur against them, complaining, would you want to take that job? Think about it. I don't think anybody with any common sense would take that job, because they knew from experience, Joshua knew from experience how they were. But you see, that's why Joshua is called by God, and God says, only be strong, be courageous. And that's what we see about Joshua's ministry. In that first battle, he was strong, he was courageous, and he fought valiantly for the Lord, and he won. He fought valiantly, and he won. And that's what we'll see all through Joshua's ministry, as he was successful in what God called him to do. He got the people across, he divided up the land, and then he died as an old man later in the promised land, having done what he was supposed to do. He carried out the ministry of Moses. He took Moses' place, and that was no small thing. That was a big thing. To follow in Moses' footsteps and his shadow was a big thing. You think about how strong a leader Moses was. Joshua had to be just as strong, because he had a lot more fighting to do, and he got it done. So read ahead, study chapter 1, and look at Joshua's call, and we'll see that he has to be encouraged to be strong, to be brave. We already know he is, but God reminds him he needs to be this way in order to be a leader of the people. And he said they would follow him, but he had to be strong. So think about that. We'll stop there, and we'll take up with Joshua chapter 1, Lord willing, next time. Okay? Let's all stand.